Today on the Mr. Maple Show, we discuss the top 25 maples sold at MrMaple.com in 2022. Hey guys, I'm Matt. Welcome to the Mr. Maple Show. We love doing this talk show about Japanese maples for you guys. It's a podcast we're bringing weekly here. We're on all major audio platforms. We're also on YouTube, and we air those videos every single Sunday at 8 p.m. So hop in that live chat. It's a lot of fun.
Hey guys, I'm Tim. Welcome to our podcast. For all y'all listeners, we've got an amazing catalog we've already been building on this podcast of great interviews from Talon Buchholz to, just amazing people. Augustin Coelho, the International President of the Maple Society, people who love maples. If you love Japanese maples, this is the podcast for you. Make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcast platform, and make sure you give us a 5-star review. We really appreciate it. That helps more people find us on your podcast stations.
And if you're an audio listener, definitely go check us out on YouTube under the Mr. Maple Show. We put out videos every single day, 7 days a week. So there's always something new coming there, and we've got a lot of fun content. Guys, today we're going to be talking about a topic that was requested by you guys. We definitely check out those subscriber comments, and we love suggestions from you guys on future content. And one of the questions that we got was, hey, can you talk about some of the top Japanese maples sold during the year? And actually, that's what we're going to do today. We're going to break down the top 25 most popular trees on Mr. Maple for the entire year of 2022. Now, this does change a little bit by year. So it changes a little bit by year, and it certainly changes a lot by inventory. Some years we may have more of something, so it's going to do better in the system here for the most sold if we have a lot more of it.
Yeah, I definitely think this is a really interesting podcast because it shows you not only what the customers really like the most, but also what we had the most stock in.
Right.
Because some of our varieties might not have made the list.
Right.
That sell out very, very quickly. In fact, we could do a whole nother podcast on the top plants that sell out super quickly that you better jump on at 10 a.m. when we list those plants every Tuesday. So
most of these aren't necessarily going to be the things that sold out the fastest, but the things we had in stock the longest, in a way. If you certainly wouldn't see like Mystic Macaw or Mayday on this list, even though they sold out in a matter of seconds when they were listed sometimes. Sometimes they sold out in 2 minutes.
Yeah. So we've got a really cool lineup here. I was just reading through the list, and I was like, man, these are some really great trees.
Yeah, so these are some of our favorites, and they were some of your favorites for good reason. That's why we want to discuss them. Just a fun way to break it down this today and to discuss some really good plants that other customers have liked. Maybe it'll open you up to something that you haven't given a chance to, and you'll say, wow, I didn't know that was so popular. Maybe I'll check that one out. So, maybe open you up to some new plants here for sure. So let's jump right into it. With number 25 on our list, we have Acer Palmatum Golden Falls.
Yeah, this is a weeping style Japanese maple that gives you yellow color. And y'all know that I love the color yellow. Golden Falls, it makes sense this is in our top 25. This is one that we've made a priority to really amp up the numbers in. And this is a plant that can be grown as a cascading ground cover almost if you don't stake it up. Mm-hmm. You can stake this tree up and let it cascade so it has that fountain type look. Or you can even grow this thing in a hanging basket like Brian Rule did, and we did that whole video on how to grow Japanese maples in hanging baskets.
So this one is a very malleable tree. It's one named by our friend Talon Buchholz, and it's very shapeable. So you can actually shape this one to whatever shape you want to make it. It's a Ryerson or Ryusei style Japanese maple, so it's going to have that similar weeping habit to Ryerson, and it's a great one to be growing. Now this one's going to be a yellow that looks a little bit more, I like to compare it to a Ryerson X Katsura. The foliage is going to be more Katsura size. It leaves out with a really nice kind of an orangey yellow in the early spring. I will say it actually holds the color a little bit longer than Katsura, but I think Katsura is an excellent comparison.
My favorite time for Golden Falls while it gives great summer color, is that springtime when you get that red border as it's leafing out, that orange-red kind of color with that red border and then the yellow interior. It gives it something a little extra, and it's one of the more dynamic weeping Japanese maples.
Yeah, it's on the list for good reason. It's been super popular. I know people have really gotten on that trend of the gardening baskets. We've had a lot of unstaked ones and low graft ones that have been really popular for that. I'm not surprised to see it on our top 25 for 2022 list. It's one we've had a lot in numbers of. We actually got to evaluate this one pretty early on for Talon Buckholtz. We got it. I think we were one of the very first nurseries ever to get this one from him. And we got out there early with it, so we produced a lot of them too. So because we had some big stock plants, we were able to actually offer this one a good bit.
I think this next one, number 24, is one that would have been higher on this list if we had more quantities available on our list.
It actually could be on that list for selling out quickly. So this one actually wasn't high numbers, but they sold out pretty quickly. And that's Acer Palmatum DeSojo.
Yeah, this is a classic Japanese maple from Japan that gives you some amazing spring interest. I mean, it's just that fiery red color in the spring, goes to green during the summer, and then gives you a fall color of that bright fire engine red. I think a lot of people with this plant, when they see photos of it, it's hard to tell if it's in spring color or in fall color because the spring color is just as dynamic as the fall color.
Yeah, it's an electric plant. I think a lot of people, I would say even a lot of nurseries have probably forgotten about this one, but the customers haven't. It's still very popular. It's one that you don't see as commonly produced in the nursery trade anymore these days, but people still respond to it. Obviously, if it's hitting our top 25 list for the year, it's one that's always highly sought after for bonsai. DeSojo's in a lot of the bonsai books, so that attributes to a lot of its popularity. We always let people know they're grafted, but they're a great starter plant to root from or to graft from or to create your own bonsai material from, or you could bonsai a 1 gallon. Great plant for that though, and really interesting spring color. Now, DeSojo and Shin DeSojo are different plants, and believe it or not, DeSojo is more highly sought after. Shin means improved. I would say DeSojo blows Shin DeSojo away for popularity, at least for us.
I would say so as well. The thing I like about DeSojo too, though, it's very heat tolerant. I mean, this is a plant that can handle a lot more heat than a typical Bloodgood style. But that color does fade out. I mean, that spring color is amazing. And it's one of those flowering plants that just gives you amazing spring color, but that does fade out as well. So it doesn't hold its color as well as Bloodgood, but it is more heat tolerant. And so this is one of those plants that just gives you some just amazing, amazing spring interest. But what about that pairing with 24 and 25? You got the Golden Falls and the DeSojo. I mean, those two alone make a great pairing of that bright yellow and that amazing intense spring red color.
Yeah, for any of you following along as well, so if you're listening to this on an audio platform, you can look up any of these trees. Every single one of these we're going to be talking about today is listed on MrMaple, and if they were one of our most popular plants, we frequently have them in stock. So if you don't see it right now, we're doing maintenance on it. It'll be back up very soon. We keep all these in stock as frequently as possible. So if you want to see pictures of these, definitely go check out MrMaple.com. You can pull up any of these cultivars by name right there in our search tab.
So number 23, this is our first Acer Shirasawanum on the list. And it's Acer Shirasawanum Autumn Moon. And this is an amazing plant. You know, I love Autumn Moon. I think Moonrise probably would have been on this list if we had it more in stock.
Right.
But Autumn Moon just gives you some amazing colors, those malting colors throughout the spring and the summer, and some really good fall color as well.
Yeah, this one kind of surprised me to see it on the list. I think it benefited from us not offering it for a year or two and then getting it back on the website. So it was like we hadn't had it for a while, so everybody jumped on it when we had it again. Autumn Moon is a gorgeous plant. I mean, it's one that you can get some really nice, almost oranges on in the early spring, especially if you can provide it with like early morning sun, late day shade. It's a gorgeous plant. It's one of the quintessential Shirasawanum. It's got that larger overall Shirasawanum leaf. And, a lot of people, grow this one just for that spring interest, but it brings the color all year.
If you check the World Maple Checklist, who registered Autumn Moon, it's credited to being registered and introduced by J.D. Vertrees himself. And so it's kind of crazy that this tree is so popular, yet people don't realize that this is a plant that is credited to J.D. Vertrees.
Yeah, it's always a hitter for us. I could see a lot of other Shirasawanums making this list if they were in higher in number. I think this was one of the first years we ever got our numbers up on Autumn Moon enough for it to get onto the list. But I definitely think there's some other Shirasawanums that probably could give it a run for its money for most popular had they been able to get up enough shots. So you got to remember, this list is also made up of the plants that we had enough of to hit this list. So some of these, might be lower than you expect. Some of our crazy Area 51s might be lower than you expect.
Yeah, this is, if you're thinking in basketball terms, this is the number of shots made, right. not the percentages of the shots made. So on the shots made category, Autumn Moon's up there. And this plant, it's one of those plants I like to grow in a container. I mean, I like to put this tree in a container, find its sweet, happy spot in the yard,
right.
Give it some protection from the hot afternoon sun or some filtered light. But if you can push that light a little bit, that's when you really get a lot of these crazy colors on Autumn Moon. Mm-hmm. And if you're in that Pacific Northwest area and you can give it more sunlight, you can really get some amazing colors on the Autumn Moon that just are almost unreal. I've seen people put photos of this tree online, and it just blew my mind that it actually was Autumn Moon because of the amazing intensity of that malting orangey yellow with lime green color. Great full moon Japanese maple. I think Dr. Durham made Autumn Moon and Acer shirasanum aureum popular in the South because he saw them growing in nurseries and people just love them. But in the South, we got to spot them in the right spots with some protection from the hot afternoon sun. But they're amazing plants with that full moon style leaf.
Now this next one just edged out Autumn Moon by one sale. So Acer palmatum, Naka Komodo weeping. No surprise, this one's on the list. It's coming in at number 22 for our most popular trees in 2022. Eventually we're going to do a full video on this. I've actually got some great footage we took in Japan. I've always been a little nervous about how to make it, and so we're going to sit down with Corbin and Brian this year, and we're going to shoot some content to add to our basically little small mini documentary on Naka Komodo weeping. You guys know this one if you follow us, but it's the national treasure of Japan. Conservatively, the tree is over 400 years old. So it's one of the most breathtaking, amazing trees I've ever seen. I've seen some accounts say it's up to 600 years old. I know the stakes on the tree, actually, our friend Ace K read them to us. The stakes actually say that they're around 200 year olds, just the stakes, how long those have been there. But just an incredible plant. It's one of those, it's the most breathtaking plant I've ever seen. I'll just, to look up at a Japanese maple that's 400 years old, it is a shock and awe factor. And you're just humbled and you think about how long this has been there in the world and how much the world's changed since a 400-year-old tree has been planted.
I remember when we were on Nippon ni Ikitai, and which is everyone wants to go to Japan. And we wanted to go to Japan, and we got to go free on this TV show by Tokyo TV. And while we were at Nakata-san's, we were looking through some literature and realized the national treasure was near his nursery. And Nakata-san was so gracious to get his own car because we couldn't get a rental car because
they didn't trust us. We were going to disappear and look at too many maples
on the TV show. Yeah. So Nakata-san drove us to go see the national treasure of Japan.
They basically assigned our interpreter. They're like, don't lose these guys on the down days because they want to go everywhere and they know how to drive in Japan. Don't lose these guys.
And when we went to go see the Naka Komodo weeping, it was in perfect fall color. And just seeing a plant of that age, that stature, I mean, it's just breathtaking. And it really was a once-in-a-lifetime experience to get to see that tree in fall color on this hillside beside this temple in the Fukushima Prefecture. And it was spectacular. I mean, Naka Komodo weeping, the national treasure of Japan. I mean, it makes sense it's on this list, but it's also one of those plants we didn't have enough stock, or it could have been much higher.
It easily could have been higher. It's one that sells out pretty quickly, but still made the list here at 22 because it sold out pretty quickly every time we offered it. Now, that's one that's interesting. Originally, we had thought, we went to Japan with an interpreter and we had asked some questions, and we had thought it might have been the same plant as Jiro Shadari from that interview. And so we actually said that, I believe, in our Growing a Greener World episode. Tim actually mentions it's the same plant.
It's believed to be from the lineage of Naka Komodo.
Yeah, after talking to an interpreter who was more horticulturally minded, we went back to the same interview and we talked to the same interview we did the first time, but we had an interpreter who understood horticulture better. And from that interview, it's our understanding that it's probably actually a seedling from that was introduced that way.
And then from the lineage further down would be Ryerson,
Golden Falls.
Golden Falls
Dragon
is in
Master,
that lineage. Dragon Master.
Fountain of Youth. All the crazy stuff we start doing.
Looking Glass Falls is in that lineage line. And they're amazing plants. They all have that extremely cascading, weeping style shape and a very unique foliage. It's not a lace leaf. It's definitely more palmatum in its nature.
So coming in here at 21, we've got one that's no shocker for popularity. Typically one of the most popular of the Ghost series, we've got Acer palmatum purple ghost.
And this is a plant that went probably half the year without being listed on MrMaple and is still in that top 25. I mean, so it is one that sells relatively quickly. But the purple ghost just gives you some unreal shades of purple. Mm-hmm. And you'll see some people online who Photoshop purple ghost. And if you see it as a bonsai, most of the time those bonsai photos of purple ghost are Photoshopped. But if you can go to MrMaple.com and check out and see the colors, the unreal colors that purple ghost does go to. And it can be a lavender purple to a fuchsia purple in the springtime. And it can really just give you some amazing, amazing colors.
Yeah, another introduction. You're going to have a lot of Talon Buchholz introductions on a list like this, but another introduction by Talon Buchholz, the Flora Wonder collection there. An amazing introduction. The entire Ghost series, we celebrate the entire Ghost series, so we're bringing back most of those. Any of the trees we're talking about today, too, they're ones we try to keep in stock. So they're plants we do high numbers of. And so if you see something or you hear us talk about something today and it's not on our website, you can always sign up to get notified because we'll have it back in stock. In fact, most of these I know we're bringing in 2023 in much higher numbers than we did in 2022. So Purple Ghost, always a crowd pleaser. I mean, I love to pair this with Summer Gold. I always like to put some yellow next to Purple Ghost. It's a little trick I'll do at garden shows. When we used to do garden shows, I'll set this one next to some intense yellows. I'll put it next to the Jordan. I'll have me a little section of Jordan there, a little section of Purple Ghost. They're both selling out right away because that intensity in the early spring is amazing. Purple Ghost, really the quintessential reticulated purple. I mean, it's the most popular reticulated purple for a good reason.
Now, we're going to have to get back out to Oregon and go visit Talon some more. But on our last trip to Oregon, which was right before COVID struck, we went and visited Talon and got to visit and see the original Purple Ghost in fall color.
Yeah, I think we actually got a selfie. I think you cropped the tree out, but it's the cover for the Ghost series. But it's us doing a selfie with Talon with the Purple Ghost right behind us there. And so he's always so gracious with his time and explaining everything to us. But no shocker here that Purple Ghost is on the list.
I love those Ghost series types. We've got a whole lot of videos on the Ghost series, and specifically one on the complete Ghost series on our YouTube channel. If you hadn't seen that, make sure you check that out after you listen to this podcast. And we love doing these series and these spotlights. And, if you haven't signed up to be subscribed to the YouTube channel, make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel because we're constantly putting out a lot of content. And a lot of that content is on these top 25.
Yeah, for sure. Now, next up, we've got an always popular one. It's one of our introductions. That's Acer Liviernum Hot Blonde, and that one's coming in at number 20. So kind of a shocker to see this one so far back on the list, but it's only because we sold out of it pretty quickly. So we didn't have as high numbers in this as some of the other plants. It's definitely one of those ones that could also be on the quickest to sell out list because it does tend to go very, very quickly when we offer it.
And of those types that sell out really, really quickly, it's probably one of the ones that we've been able to offer the highest number. I mean, we've made this a priority since it's one of our best introductions, the Acer Oliveranum Hot Blonde. Now, Acer Oliveranum Hot Blonde is a hybrid with a Japanese maple. And the neat story behind this is that Matt and I were walking around the Keith Arboretum in Chapel Hill, and we went to collect an Acer Oliveranum. And this was a chance seedling found from that tree and brought back to our nursery. We went through a whole bunch of different seeds of the Acer Oliveranum Hot Blonde.
Yeah, we actually had about 40 or 50 of those
of that style,
kind of yellowish takes on it. And from that, you might have seen our Area 51 video. We kind of break down how we evaluate things, but we picked the very best one of those over time. So over time, we kind of whittled down and said, "Do you like this one best?" "No, I like this one best." And so only the best one of that whole set made it. Originally, we were going with the name Golden Ticket. We had a friend who told us he had a tree, or actually a plant with a patent on it named Golden Ticket. So we went back to our original name of Hot Blonde. We didn't chicken out and stuck with it, and everybody's loved it. We've had it really well received. People like the name. It's kind of funny, and it's a name that I think aptly describes this intense yellow and its high heat propensity. I mean, this one can handle extreme heats. It's on our heat seekers for a reason, Acer oleiferatum are Chinese maples that can go in extreme zones. They're extremely fast growing, but they're also, humidity proof. They're also very, very durable. This is a tree that's going to perform in zone 9 and outperform many of the other trees you think of as Japanese maples. And I got extra credit because I named Hot Blonde after my wife. So
there are so many great things with Acer oleiferatum Hot Blonde. This is a strongly vigorous growing plant. It grows very fast, and it fills out a spot pretty quickly. I love this plant because it's so heat tolerant. Being part of the heat seekers, those Acer oleiferatum are just super, super heat tolerant. But this thing just gives some amazing golden yellow color during the summer, during the spring, and late fall. And then going into when it gets to the fall, it really gives you some amazing colors of bright orange red. I remember we sent Acer oleiferatum Hot Blonde to Talon Buchholz. Mm-hmm. And one of the things he was most impressed about was the fall color. He was sending us fall color photos saying, wow, look how amazing this thing is in the fall. And it really does. I know in the greenhouses, we've had it put on fall color for almost a month of just bright, bright orange red. I mean, it would rival Osakazuki on its fall color. Mm-hmm. And this is a plant that's super heat tolerant and gives you some yellow color during the summer.
Yeah, it's one of our favorites for a good reason, and it's one we try to keep offering. So stick with us if it isn't in stock. Just sign up to get notified, or be checking our 10 at 10 emails, like our bigger sets. So most of these things are going to always be in bigger sets. So you're going to see these plants pop back up during our 10 at 10. We put 10 new plants on the website every Tuesday at 10. So most of these plants are going to be premiering or re-premiering during that time frame.
So next up, at number 19, we've got Acer palmatum Ukigumo. So we go from a yellow to a white Japanese maple.
Yeah, we did a video on this. You definitely want to check it out on YouTube, and it's some tips to give Ukigumo its best color. It is inconsistent. I always let people know Ukigumo is not going to be white every single year. If you do there's some certain little tricks you can do to make it more consistently white, and the most basic of those is leafing it out slowly. So if you give this one as much shade as possible, I have one in a high oak canopy, and honestly, it gets pretty good color every single year, but it's leafing it out as slowly as possible. So if you're in a high heat area, providing this one with as much shade as possible is going to give it the best white for it. And it'll shock you. I mean, you'll see some years where it's green, and then you'll kind of forget what you loved about it. And then you're going to come out there some years, and it's going to knock your socks off with bold whiteness. It is one that I love every single year for the fall color, though, because it is consistently really bright oranges and yellows. And so it's a really great fall color every year, but it's an amazing tree. And when it's on, it's hard to beat Ukigumo.
And Ukigumo is known as the floating clouds maple. And that is believed to be what Ukigumo translates as. Sometimes you may even see people selling it as floating clouds. But remember, like Matt said, it's one of those plants that I like to plant out there for a fall color plant because it's an amazing fall color plant every single year. Mm-hmm. And in those years that it gives you white, it really steals the show and gives you an extra dynamic in the garden and landscape.
Yeah, it's always popular for good reason. And sometimes we sell out of it. It takes a little while for it to get back in stock. And when it does, I mean, we had huge numbers in this in 2022, and it was super popular. I mean, it's popular for good reason, too. I mean, it's always highly sought after. An amazing Japanese maple, probably not produced as much as it used to be. It's probably when we first got into Japanese maples, in the early, we've been doing it our whole lives, but when we really, really started doing this in the early 2000s, it was probably more prevalent. And nowadays it might not be, and that might be why it sells out for us so quickly. Not everybody's doing it. Awesome plant to be growing.
Number 18 is our first weeping red lace leaf.
Wow, that's weird.
And for a weeping red lace leaf, our number 18 is Anaba Shadari.
Yeah, now you've heard us say before, most people's entryway into Japanese maples are red lace leaves and red uprights. So always red lace leaves and red uprights are going to be a special place on a top 10 sales list. So Anaba Shadari, one of our most popular trees. It's one we produce a lot of. I know when we do a lot of articles, we've had a lot of people say to us, I had a quote in Fine Gardening, and they said, "What's your favorite upright red?" Weeping red. And Anaba Shadari made that list because it's an excellent, durable, heat-tolerant red. It was one of the first ones we were growing here because my dad's been doing Anaba Shadari since the late 80s. It's one that he loved, so he was offering it and grafting it very early on. And for good reason. I mean, it's durable. It gives you everything you love about a Japanese maple. It's weeping. It's a little more low and spreading, and it's just got a great overall characteristic to it. It's one of those trees, it's easy to pick it out of a lineup because it's so distinctive. great, bold scarlet red fall color. And it's one we're always going to offer Anaba Shadari here at our nursery. It's just too popular not to. It's always so great.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic plant. It's super heat tolerant. It's part of our Japanese maples that are very heat tolerant. We've got a whole lot of series on our YouTube channel on heat tolerant Japanese maples. Mm-hmm. And it is one of the most heat tolerant red weeping lace leaves. It's a great plant to use out in the landscape. It's a great tree for containers, but it is a little faster growing weeping red lace leaf.
Yeah, it's durable, it's exceptional, and it's really like I said, it's most people's what they think of when they think of a Japanese maple. You know, Anaba Shadari fits that bill perfectly. So some plants on this list are going to be people's entryway points because we have a lot of people who buy their first Japanese maple from MrMaple, but then a lot of people who come back for the more exciting and rare stuff. So you're going to see a mixture of both on this list, and I think Anaba Shadari makes perfect sense why it's coming in here at number 18. A lot of people see this one on our website. We've got some great photos of it for one because we've had it for so long, and it's one that we always offer, and it for good reason. It's a great plant.
I think one of the reasons why it's really popular too is while it does go green later in the summer, it does it a little greener than some of the other red lace leaves, it does have a really good fall color.
Right.
And it's consistently giving you a really good fall color on a weeping red lace leaf. And I think that's one of the reasons people really love the Anaba Shadari.
It's a perfect container plant. I mean, it's one you put on a patio planter, bring everything you love about a Japanese maple up closer to the porch, and it does great in the deep south. So it's one we just keep producing because, you know, it's bulletproof and it's tried and tested. So coming in here at number 17 on our list, so this one might surprise you, and it kind of surprises me. I think we finally got this tree up in enough numbers for it to hit the most popular list, but it's always popular. It probably would have been on the quickest to sell out list when we were doing it in lower numbers, but it's Acer Palmatum Kurenai Gishi.
Yeah, the red lion Japanese maple. Now, Kurenai actually means that deep, dark red, almost kind of color. And so it's really like that deep, dark red lion Japanese maple. Mm-hmm. This tree is a plant that Matt and I sought after for years. We heard rumors of this plant in Japan of, hey, do you know there's a red form of the lion's head in Japan? And Matt and I were like, man, that sounds like something awesome.
Right.
And all nurserymen were like, man, we've got to track down this plant.
Another one that's, quintessential for the container garden. This one is a fun plant for railroad gardens, fairy gardens, anywhere you want a small, highly interesting a tree that's going to bring a lot of drama to a small landscape. It's the perfect Japanese maple to go out for a conifer collector. If you're a conifer collector and you want some just crazy colors going on there, Kurenai Gishi is going to bring it in the spring, the summer, and the fall. That spring color is awesome. I mean, that's when it truly looks like a deep red lion's head Japanese maple. You can get a little more green in it midsummer, but it's still a gorgeous plant. Almost gets a more of an emeraldy color with pink-red new growth over it, so you're getting a ton of displays. And I've had it be, I definitely see the comparison to Shishigashira in the fall. I've had some intense oranges and yellows, and it definitely has some of what I love about Shishigashira in the fall in Kurenai Gishi as well.
Now, Kurenai Gishi was brought into the United States in 2008, and at our Hillstone Arboretum, we actually have one of the very first Kurenai Gishi in the country. We actually bought the guy's nursery, Brian Upchurch. We bought most of his nursery and his stock plants, and he was the guy who brought this tree to the United States in 2008. And Kurenai Gishi was named by Masao Shiyano, found by one of his friends, and he got to put that name of that red lion, the Kurenai Gishi name on it. And it's a perfect name for this plant. Great container plant, and is a great tree to use out in the landscape.
Shout out to Yano-san at World Maple Park. He's super interesting and always one of my favorite people to talk about when it comes to Japanese maples. So next up here on our list at number 16, and I'm going to say I'm a little surprised to see this one as high as number 16. I think last year this one might have cracked the top 5. I would think it would have been in our top 5. Always popular for us, always in high numbers. I think we just got some more things in higher numbers. We rarely let this one lapse from our website, so it's always on there. Acer Palmatum Twomblys Red Sentinel.
I love what Twomblys Red Sentinel does in the landscape and garden. This is a narrow columnar red Japanese maple. So if you want a flagpole of color, this thing gives you some amazing spring cherry reds, some maroons during the summer, and then some bright reds in the fall. But it doesn't have a lot of side branches, so it stays relatively narrow. and fits in a lot of small spaces in the garden and landscape.
Leave your central leader on this one. You're going to have better columnar growth if you're not topping this one. I will slightly prune out any wide branches that are growing on this one. Also, much like Tsukasa Silhouette, growing this one in a sunny spot. If you have it in an area where you can grow Japanese maples in more sun, putting this one in a sunny spot is going to keep it even more narrow and columnar long term. Twomblys Red Sentinel was a selection by Ken Twombly of Connecticut, and he found this bud sport. It was kind of like a witch's broom, so we don't really classify these differently, but it was kind of like a witch's broom that occurred but then turned into a columnar plant. So by grafting this trait, we've locked in that more columnar, narrow trait. It's easily on any of our favorite columnar trees list. Always very popular for its color, intensity, and that fall color is amazing. I've had some intense shades of almost pink red in the fall. It's one I have in my garden, and I love it. I have a very mature one in my garden that's 25 years plus, and it's a gorgeous tree to be growing.
This tree is just so easily to be used out in the landscape and garden. And I have seen sometimes people who grow Twomblys Red Sentinel relatively fast at some nurseries, they can get a little bit wider, but they still have that more narrow shape to them, almost that sort of globular, narrow shape to them, which still make them excellent to be used in the landscape. But Ken Twombly, when I talked to him, it was literally, he grafted a witch's broom and thought, hey, I'm going to have this little dwarf. And as he evaluated it further, he went out there and looked at it, and it looked like a sentinel standing out there. And that's where it got the name of Twomblys for Ken Twombly Red Sentinel.
It's definitely one I wouldn't recommend over-fertilizing. So if you can grow this one at a more moderate pace, you're going to have a more columnar tree. Some of the nurseries can give this one a bad name by over-pushing it. If you're over-fertilizing it and over-pushing it, you can almost take out that short and center node. I've seen people over-flush it, grow it way too fast, and it kind of either gets leggy or it gets too wide. So if you're growing this one at a more moderate pace, you're going to get a prettier tree. So you can look at some great examples of this on MrMaple.com, where we have 10, 12-year-old trees that are retaining an excellent skinny habit to them and just looking amazing. So, don't overpush this one. Grow it at a nice pace, and I think it's going to be one of your favorite columnar plants you can add. Everybody's looking for more columnar. I mean, that's why this one's always on the list. Everybody's running out of room in the garden, and they're looking for narrow. And this one provides that height, but also, in a skinny habit to it.
I think when we talked about this on Growing a Greener World, we were featured on Joe Lample's or Joe Gardner's Growing a Greener World. And we mentioned this as one of our favorite Japanese maples. We were walking through the garden and pointed it out. This tree became so popular. I mean, not just for us, but for other nurseries, because it is that amazing plant you can use in your landscape. If you want some red color out there, but you don't want to provide shade out in your garden, this is an excellent plant that will have that narrow shape, but give you that flagpole of color out there in the landscape and garden. And you don't get a lot of plants that give you a flagpole of red color like the Twomblys Red Sentinel can in your garden.
Now, one thing I love about breaking down these top 25, it's a good diverse list. So if you're starting out with Japanese maples, or if you're a collector, this is a great list to be looking at for popular Japanese maples. And you'll see why these are popular. It's why we're talking about them today. Each of these have their own uniqueness to them. They all bring something different to the table. And this next one couldn't be any more different than Twomblys Red Sentinel. At number 15, we have Acer Palmatum Kiyohime.
This is a great pairing with Twomblys Red Sentinel. One grows straight up like a flagpole, and the other one just grows wide and gives you that toadstool-like appearance.
Yeah, this one has a bright purple border in the early spring to a green eye, and it just makes a toadstool. That's the best way to describe it. It makes this little low, it's not weeping like the Anaba Shadari, but it still kind of makes that umbrella-like shape. Always popular for bonsai. Kiyohime is a classic going back to Japan for bonsai. It's one that's been popular for many, many years in that small container or bonsai-like setting because it's really perfect for a container garden. I love putting this one on a patio planter because it makes the perfect little dome on top of a patio planter.
Kiyohime is extremely heat tolerant. Like Matt said, it's extremely popular for bonsai. And this is a plant that just has a lot of horizontal growth. And so instead of having that more upright appearance, a lot of the branches on this plant, as it matures, grow laterally. And this gives this plant a very unique and distinct shape, but then with that spring color, with that purple border. I mean, that's one of my favorite times to photograph this plant in the early spring when you really have that purple border, or new growth flushes during the summer. I mean, it just can really be some intense purple red borders on top of a green leaf. And it just gives such a unique texture because of that round, almost perfectly filled in shape. I love Kiyohime. It's great for containers. It's great. I mean, I fell in love with this plant probably at Gristmill Landscaping, seeing his huge Kiyohime that he had. And it was, 20, 30 years old.
Right. The late Bob Farmer had an amazing garden there. Ed Shin hooked us up with him one time to go and see his place. And wow, I wish we could go and do a whole video on his place. He's since passed away, but what an amazing collection of plants he had there in his landscape. Mature, amazing specimens. Some 30-plus years old specimens of some cultivars. And we had a blast going there with Richard Bomar and Mike Wilson and just kind of geeking out being big kids. We've been doing these maple tours for a long time. We're just now starting to get them on camera for you guys. That was a long time ago, but I love Acer Palmatum Kiyohime. I love what it brings to the table. I love that it's a tabletop, so you can plant this one. Me and Brian were really shocked and awed by this amazing specimen that Tom Nunnenkamp had there at Maple Walk. Saw that this fall, and Tom had actually pruned out any conflicting branches and really accentuated its width. So he's actually getting a lot more width out of it quicker, making a wider, smaller plant by he crawls under this little tabletop high graft and prunes on it. So everything's kind of spreading out. Just an amazing plant. I saw some gorgeous specimens of this too at Bill Shell's in Auburn, Alabama. And just a great plant to be growing. Again, tough as nails, durable, popular for that spring flush, popular for every season. But it's a great plant for an area where you want some high drama, but you don't want a lot of height. You can put this under a windowsill, let it spread out. It's going to be a high-intensity plant. Now, if you put it very close to your house, it's not going to grow into your foundation, but you're going to get more of a half moon than a circle with it if you're growing it up close to something. I've certainly done that a few times, put one up closer to a structure and just kind of let it be a half shape, which is unique in itself too. But I love Kiyohime.
I think you nailed it, bro. Everybody is looking for that tree, that plant to put underneath their window. They don't want it to grow up. They don't want it to block the window, but they were looking for something to grow short and wide.
Right.
And Kiyohime is a perfect plant for that. I mean, even if you have a brick house, this plant is extremely heat tolerant. So for most climates, it could do very well there.
I'm going to have to go back and catch those whole grouping pairings they were doing at Sarah P. Duke. I mean, they were almost growing this like junipers for juniper interest, where you're growing multiple trees as a hedge and letting them fill out an entire area. Skip the juniper unless you're buying them on MrMaple, but check out Kiyohime. They were growing this one basically as a large form hedge, multiple trees, letting them grow together, and it gave you that kind of mountainous effect, but it also gave you a lot of what you see with some of those low spreading conifers. So it kind of gave you some really interesting Japanese maple form of that same dynamic.
It's so interesting what you can do with these Japanese maples when you look at their natural shapes and you find ways to do something very unique with them. Like with the Ryerson styles, growing them with hanging baskets, like Kiyohime, growing them, in this hedge type. It's so unique, and there's so many different ways Japanese maples grow that I just love them.
So very unique next one here, number 14, Acer Palmatum Ryerson, or Ryusei, however you want to call it. Originally, this one was Ryusei in Japan. Talon always tells me to stick with Ryusei. We used to do the patent work for Ryerson when we used to graph this one. So we did call it Ryerson here at our website. But Ryusei or Ryerson, exact same plant either way. Awesome one to be growing. Dynamically durable. It's very heat tolerant. And this one, as you've heard us say so many times, it gets about as tall as you stake it.
Introduced by Kobayashi Momiji in Japan, this plant is amazing. It's extremely heat tolerant. It's a vigorous grower. And it's heavily cascading. They're all different styles of cascading. There's semi-cascading. There's cascading weeping. And then there's almost this super cascade. Right. And Ryerson would definitely be in that super cascade category because it just droops straight down when you stake it up.
Yeah, super durable. This is a green that's going to hold that green very well during the spring and summer. It's a really chartreuse green early on. This one can have some shades of oranges to even orangey red in the fall. Excellent container plant. A lot of people are growing this one, as hanging baskets now or just in patio planters. It's super durable. I mentioned Tom Nunnenkamp's garden, but I think about his because we were just there not too long ago. He has some big boulders around one, and it handles that heat and that heavy Charlotte climate, and it even has some rocks around it, giving it some residual heat. It's exceptionally durable. I've seen this one in full sun in Dallas, Fort Worth, which blew me away. It's super durable. It's super easy to grow. It's probably most people's entryway into like what we're now calling our Pendulous Treasures collection, where people kind of get into this interesting palmate style weeping form, and just a great plant to be growing. And it couldn't be any more opposite than our next one on the list either.
This plant is spectacular. And the name Ryusei, some people say that means dragon spirit. Some people it means dragon fountain. But Ryu is definitely one of those terms you see reoccurring in Japanese maples that means dragon. And love this style of plant. It's a plant that I fell in love with when it came back from Japan. And it's a plant that I think is going to get more and more popular the more people use it.
So Ryerson couldn't be any more different than this next one on our list, Acer Palmatum Seryu.
Yeah, Seryu, the name on this one, as you see that Ryu coming in again, means blue-green dragons. And for years, we didn't know why this was. But if you plant this tree in deep shade, or you have a really large tree that begins to shade itself out, you start to get that blue-green color on Seryu where it gets its name.
Yeah, super fast growing. There's a reason why this one's popular. It's normally to shade out other Japanese maples in people's collection. Plant Seryu, it's going to grow over a foot to a foot and a half of growth a year. It's not uncommon for it to be over a foot and a half of growth a year. It handles sun, it handles shade. It's a gorgeous upright specimen. It's the fastest growing upright we actually do, but also a lace leaf. So it kind of breaks that idea of lace leaves being more of a low cascading umbrella. This one is extremely vigorous, extremely colorful. It's going to be a green to an emerald green in the summer. Kind of gets some really nice shades in it. It's actually really bright chartreuse if you have it in sunlight. But the fall colors are excellent. I've had some really bright reds to bold, dark reds. And so you get some excellent shades on this one, and really fun Japanese maple to be growing. It kind of breaks the mold. You know, people always say, like, how big do Japanese maples get? How fast do they grow? Well, I mean, I point out Kiyohime to them. That's the 3 foot even in 10 years. Something like Seryu is going to grow over a foot of growth a year. It's not uncommon for you to have a 15 to 20 foot tree even in a 10-year period. So it's going to get out there. It's going to fill out quite quickly. So there's such a diverse group here. One of the reasons I like this list so much is because it really mixes things up. I mean, these are the top sales items for our Japanese maples in 2022, but it's a great entry point for people into Japanese maples or for collectors to look at some of these other ones. There's some great ones on this list, and it's a very diverse group. Like you guys have shopped and made nice collections with what you've shopped for.
Now, Seryu, many people think this tree is a classic Japanese maple, and it may not actually be as old as you think it is. It was brought into the United States via Wada Nursery to the National Arboretum in 1972. So this is a plant that is, you know, it's been around for 50 years now in the United States, but it really wasn't introduced much longer before that, even in Japan. And it's just so unique, so different. It's such a great tree. It's extremely heat tolerant. It's one of the most heat tolerant trees we do. And being it's so unique, like Matt said, it breaks the mold of being a lace leaf that's upright. It's grown so much in popularity in those 50 years that this is a tree that everybody who grows Japanese maples knows Seryu. And it's such a great tree to use out in the landscape with some really good fall color.
So next up on our list, another Talon Buchholz introduction. Coming in here at number 12, we have GGW. That's how it goes on our boxes. So we've got Geisha Gone Wild. Always a popular tree. Geisha Gone Wild is one of our most consistent pink on red Japanese maples. It is high drama. It is flashy at its finest. It is bringing the absolute Japanese maple funk to your garden. It brings that high intensity drama for sure. Everybody that sees this one, I mean, it's almost too much for some people. If you don't like variegated plants, this one's going to put you into a coma right here because it is intense.
I know when Amy introduced Purple Ghost, my wife said, if I'm going to be on the MrMaple show, can I introduce Geisha Gone Wild? And so we had my wife introduce it because this is one of her favorite plants. It is truly a really nice pink Japanese maple. I mean, when people want a pink Japanese maple, this one gives them a great, more vigorous growing pink Japanese maple than most.
Yeah, my favorite time frame for this one, full disclosure, is in that starting into summer phase where you're like almost in June and you still have a lot of pink on it, but you're getting some green undertones. I love that time frame for it. It's so cool. You get some green, some white, and some pink all at the same time. That's my favorite time frame. Now in fall, it's actually excellent too, because where you get the dark pink, that that'll fall to a bright red, and then the darker red in the spring is even a bolder red, so you get two tone shades of like bright pink and red that are even like that fiery picked up fall color. Excellent fall color plant. It's one we can't do enough of. That's why it's on this list. Honestly, we offer it a lot. We offer it frequently. We try not to let some of these sell out, and hey, it doesn't. We try to keep it on the website very, very frequently. Sometimes it is gone, but we get it back quickly.
Now, Geisha Gone Wild is a reoccurring sport that happens on the cultivar Geisha. Now, the sports may be slightly different. Like Shiraz is another variegated sport on Geisha.
Yeah, we actually found a third one here. We just didn't need another tree with a similar name.
Brian Sherman found one in New Jersey. And it's one of those things that it's really stable. I mean, this is one of the most stable pink on red variegated types that's out there. And the pink color is truly spectacular. I love pairing this with things like Golden Falls and Summer Gold because those dynamic color contrasts seem unreal when you have a Japanese maple that's yellow and then you've got a Japanese maple that's pink.
I did have a graph that came out with the all red form. I'm thinking we can call that one Geisha Gone Mild. It's pretty rare, though. It is extremely consistent on its variegation. I had somebody ask what we meant about that, and we're like, about being stable. And that means that variegation holds very, very well for a variegated Japanese maple. It's not one you're going to have to put a lot of fuss up with, trim out reversions. It is very consistent, and it's a great plant to be growing.
Now, one of the things about this variegated sport is it's more upright than Geisha. I mean, Geisha is often a plant that's more shrub-like.
Yeah, it's almost a little ball.
It's a great container plant, but Geisha Gone Wild is a more upright tree, so it adds a lot of vigor to the plant, but it also just keeps some of that pink color everyone loves about Geisha.
It's also on our list, and you can put Shiraz there as 1B with it, as one of our most variegated heat-tolerant plants. Like, it goes in a lot of areas where people, aren't thinking about growing variegated Japanese maples, and it is super durable, as well as being super, super showy.
Yeah, I love Geisha Gone Wild out in the landscape and garden. It's an amazing plant. Number 11 coming up.
Can't believe this one didn't crack the top 10.
I can't believe this one didn't crack the top 10, but we are shopping on MrMaple.com.
Most people would have guessed this one is number one. I would say it's probably number one for most nurseries. For most nurseries, this is their most popular Japanese maple, bar none. Can you guess it in the comment section, guys?
This is a plant that if you go to somewhere out in the landscape and garden, you see a red Japanese maple, people say it's this.
Right. My most annoying thing is in all of the maple groups online and all maple communities, people say, hey, what do I have here? And everybody guesses Acer Palmatum Bloodgood. Whether it's Acer Palmatum Bloodgood or not, they ignore the whole, hey, let's check for a graft union. Let's make sure it's a cultivar. The original form of Acer Palmatum Bloodgood is an excellent plant. It's gotten a little mixed up in the trade because a lot of people sell seedlings from Bloodgood and say, that's a Bloodgood maple. And it's probably the one we get the most mixed up on the name, even though it is an English-ish name. I mean, it's a last name is where you get the name Bloodgood, but it's easy for people to say who are English speaking. But it's probably one of the ones that people say wrong the most. Like, people would call the nursery back when I used to answer the phone all the time, and they'd say, I want some of those good bloods, some of those true bloods, some of those blood greats. I mean, I've had every version of Bloodgood ever. It's actually the gentleman's last name who had Bloodgood nurseries in New York and Pennsylvania. They moved around a little bit, but it was an early on nursery here in the United States and helped popularize Japanese maples all over the world. And the last name there was actually Bloodgood. So it was kind of fortuitous that this nursery introduced a tree that was so well thought of as blood red. So people associated that name with that color so much. But actually, Bloodgood is just the last name. It'd be like Nichols Red. It's not named for the color.
They have a London plane tree called Bloodgood as well.
Right.
But it has nothing to do with...
Not as popular.
No, it's not the same color as a Bloodgood Japanese maple. And that made Japanese maple so popular in America. And this is a great tree. I mean, this is a tree that gives you some good spring color, some great fall color, and is one of the first Japanese maples to give that red color out in the landscape as a grafted cultivar. It's such an amazing plant out in the landscape or garden, and it's used everywhere, but collectors often underrate this plant. It is still a fantastic red Japanese maple. It's just used very frequently.
Yeah, I mean, I'm shocked to see it so far down our list. I mean, we do a ton of everything here at MrMaple, and oftentimes Bloodgood is people's entryway into Japanese maples. I talked about that with the weeping red, the Anaba Shadari, but Bloodgood is another one that tends to be someone's first plant. They get a Bloodgood, they're like, wow, this is really cool. They start appreciating all it can be, hits that intense fire engine red fall color, and then they're hooked, right? Then they're off to the races, and they're checking out this list of the top 25 list. But Bloodgood's typically one that people get, very early on in their collecting. But don't shame it just for that. It's a great plant. It's a piece of Japanese maple history, and I think every collector should have a Bloodgood in their garden. I mean, do you really grow Japanese maples if you don't have a Bloodgood?
It's an amazing plant. It's a piece of history, and this is a plant that is just, it's a classic. If you talk about a classic Japanese maple in the United States, it's one of the most classic. It's one of the first red Japanese maples, and always remember, if you've got someone out there and they say it's a Bloodgood, look and make sure it's grafted, because often that's how plants get out in the nursery trade wrong, is someone comes by and starts grafting a seedling, and that can cause many, many different forms of Bloodgood to be sold out in the nursery trade.
So guys, we haven't even cracked our top 10 yet. Let us know, if you're watching this in the live feed on YouTube, what you think our number one bestseller for 22 was. You might be surprised, you might get it right, you might get it wrong, but go ahead and give us a guess right now as we're getting into the top 10, what you think the number one Japanese maple for 2022 was.
If Bloodgood is number 11, Bloodgood's number 11. That's crazy. Most people would, if we wouldn't have said Bloodgood at number 11, a lot of people would have said Bloodgood, that's your bestseller.
So getting into the top 10 here, let's get it going. Number 10, Acer Palmatum dissectum Orangiola. Now, this was a former Maple Society Tree of the Year. I think you're going to see a lot of commonality with that. They're popular trees for a reason. Orangiola is often one of our favorite. If you count it as a red, it goes through a lot of color changes. If you're counting this one as a red, it's my favorite red.
It's one of my favorite weeping red lace leaves. I consider it as a red. And it just continues to give you color changes throughout the season. In the springtime, you get some really nice orange-red new growth. And that's really where it gets its name of Orangiola. And it has this orange-red new growth that then turns to this maroonish color with this other shade of red in there as well, to an emerald red-green, to an emerald green. And you keep seeing these flushes of new growth of ever-changing color on Orangiola. And that's why it's made this tree so popular, is that ever-changing color on Orangiola, where you just keep getting all these different shades of red on this plant, as well as the fact that this plant has almost that same style of heavily cascading habit that you get out of something like Ryerson.
There are so many colors with Orangiola. It really goes through a ton of changes. Some people would almost consider it more red-orange in the fall. I've had it be a ton of colors. I almost consider it more like a brick red, dark orangey red. And it's a colorful plant no matter what season you grow it in. It is one of my very favorite plants for spring interest, though, and midsummer interest. That's really when I love it its most, is that midsummer.
I think Fair Trees actually goes through on some of these red, what we would consider red Japanese maples, and even puts them in some of his green categories in some of his very first books, which is interesting that, we can't even get people to agree whether this is a red Japanese maple or a green Japanese maple. It's one of those plants that just has so many different colors that keep coming across this plant. Is it a green Japanese maple that puts on red new growth, or is it a red Japanese maple that then fades to green?
It's a lot of people's third lace leaf. Like if you already have a green and a red, it's the perfect accompaniment to that, because it's going to bring you, parts you like about both. And I think it's one of the best Japanese maples you can be growing here in the South. It's super durable, it's super consistent, and just, every color in the book kind of comes out in Orangiola.
If you're looking for a hanging basket Japanese maple that is heavily, heavily cascading, that's red, get a low graft Orangiola, put it in a hanging basket, and you're going to have that same effect like we talk about with the Golden Falls for a hanging basket, but with a weeping red Japanese maple. Love Orangiola and everything that it does.
So this next one, number 9 on our list, I'm kind of shocked this one's as low as it is as well. I would have actually thought, my brain, this one would be in the top 5. Acer Palmatum Emperor 1. Same plant as Red Emperor, if you're familiar with that. Emperor 1, always a classic. If somebody calls and they say, I'm in Dallas and I want a Bloodgood, we'll say, hey, have you considered an Emperor 1? It's very similar, a little bit more heat tolerant. Check out our full video we did. We did 2 parts to it, to Red Maple Nurseries. This was one of Dick Wolf's best introductions for good reason. Emperor 1, bulletproof, one of my favorite upright reds.
Yeah, extremely heat tolerant. It's one of the most heat tolerant red uprights. But check out our full video on red maple nurseries. This plant is amazing. It's one of my favorite of all the red uprights that he introduced. I mean, he introduced Moonfire, Red Baron, a lot of other red uprights, and Emperor One was the best of them all. I mean, it was extremely vigorous, extremely heat tolerant, and it gives you that red color. It's kind of like that Shin Bloodgood. I mean, it's that supposed to be more improved form of Bloodgood. It gives you everything you like about Bloodgood, but is more heat tolerant.
Yeah, it tends to beat Bloodgood to 15 feet. It's not uncommon for it to be over a foot, sometimes even 1.5 feet of growth a year. It's not quite as fast as Seru, but it can rival it. I've had it put on 1.5 feet of growth some seasons for sure. It's one of the faster growing upright reds, tends to slow down a good bit in that 15-foot range, but excellent plant to be growing. High heat, high durability for a red, hard to beat Emperor One. This one gets out there, has a consistent, nice tree form too, so it's what you think of as a quintessential kind of upright Japanese maple. I love that it has a green kind of glossy undertone to it, especially in the summer when it's blowing around in the wind. You kind of get that green undertone waving at you. It's just really showy there in the garden. It also has kind of a glossier sheen to the leaf, which might be part of the secret to its heat tolerance. But Emperor One, especially if you're in a high heat area, think about this one. It's a great plant to be growing. Doesn't surprise me it cracks our top 10 here because we sell a ton of them.
At number 8, we've got another Dick Wolf introduction from Red Maple Nurseries. Now, this one, often people don't realize is a Dick Wolf introduction. It's Acer Palmatum dissectum Red Dragon.
Yeah, I think Dick named this one, but then he didn't get it out there as much as some of his other ones. It kind of got popular after the fact for him. I mean, he certainly did it, but I think other people even got this one into higher production than Dick Wolf did. I don't think he knew how good it was. And Red Dragon is one that is always popular in the trade. There's something to be said in a name, and there's something to be said about a name that can be said. So people can come up to a garden center, they can ask for Red Dragon. It's easy to remember, it's catchy, but it's also a great plant. So this is a durable, low weeping red lace leaf. That's one of the more miniature style reds, so it's going to stay a little smaller than some of the other larger reds. Great candidate for a container garden, and really nice fiery red fall color too.
What I like about Red Dragon is when you give this tree sunlight, this tree has that glowing type effect like you'd get out of something like a fire glow. I mean, it has that orange red to the back side of the leaf when you give this sunlight. And when this blows in the wind, it has that glowing type effect on that heavily dissected lace leaf. And this tree, like Matt says, is a really slow grower. So it's one of the smaller weeping red lace leaves. Great for containers. But it's also, as J.D. Vertrees talks about weeping lace leaf styles, plant these plants on a hill like we did at Hillstone Arboretum. And you can really see this tree and really appreciate that heavily cascading habit because those hills accentuate that weeping style and allow that plant to really have that cascading habit to it. And we've got a full video on Red Dragon where you can see this tree on a hill in its weeping habit with that glowing type effect like I talked about. For a weeping red lace leaf, Red Dragon holds its color extremely well. And so this is a more heat tolerant weeping red lace leaf that many of y'all can grow in your garden and landscape.
Yeah, awesome plant. Coming in here at number 7, we have Acer Palmatum Summer Gold. Now, Tim told me his New Year's resolution in 2023 is to quit saying yellow so much, so he's probably not going to be able to talk about this one much. Summer Gold is an exceptionally heat-tolerant, bright yellow Japanese maple. I've seen this in full sun in Atlanta, not skipping a beat.
For a golden Japanese maple, this tree really brings you some bright colors that are lighter than green, but just really give you good contrast out in the landscape and garden. Summer Gold, it's one of those plants that brings out so many other colors out in the landscape and garden. Check out our video on how to use yellow out in the landscape and garden because Summer Gold, this plant is one of my favorites. It's one of the more heat-tolerant yellow Japanese maples, and it's a plant that's upright, but it's not a very large growing tree. We're talking 6 to 8 foot in 10 years, meaning this is a tree most of y'all can grow in a relatively small space, great for container plants, and it can really give you some really nice pink reds to reds in the fall.
Yeah, this is one from Girardelli Nursery in Italy that's very popular for good reason. I mean, Summer Gold's so consistent, it's durable, it's going to bring everything you want in that bright yellow coloration. I would say Summer Gold and Hot Blonde are two of the only yellows you want to be putting in full sun that are in that palmatum style foliage. They're typically amongst the most heat tolerant for, upright yellow Japanese maples. excellent ones to be growing. In general, the more yellow or the more variegated, the more late day shade you're going to need on a plant. Summer Gold surprises. It is consistent. It's durable. It brings a really nice, almost pink red fall color as well, and has that larger, almost, it's definitely related to Shirosawinum. It has some Shirosawinum influence in it, but it has that larger, rounder leaf, even with a palmatum style, and really cool plant to be growing.
So at number 6, we have Acer palmatum Turkey Mama.
Yeah, we've had people say that to us. We were at the Nashville Lawn and Garden Show one year, and maybe Tim was getting onto the country accent even more, but this lady walked by and she said, "Did that boy just say Turkey Mama?"
Tamukiyama. Sounds a little bit like Turkey Mama, so I can get it. I know some of our employees call it Tamuka Duke. But this is a classic Japanese maple. It's one of the best weeping red lace leaves. It leaves out 2 weeks later than a lot of the other weeping lace leaves, meaning it's great for higher elevations. So it's great for cold areas, but it's also extremely, extremely heat tolerant, and it holds its color extremely well. And so for a weeping red lace leaf, it's hard to beat a Tamukiyama that was introduced, hundreds of years ago by Kobayashi Momiji in Japan. The same people who introduced Ryerson.
We actually got to go to this nursery. It was so cool to go to a nursery. It's been around, since the 1700s. And this is one I think they introduced in the 1800s. I mean, it's been around a minute. An amazing plant that's durable, consistent. It wasn't on the original 1700s. It might have even been a 1700s cultivar introduction, but not on that original list. But it's old. It's been out there for a minute, and it's still popular for good reason. It's one that stood the test of time. It's a very popular one in garden centers for good reason as well. It's consistently on our top heat performers for red lace leaves. This is one that works great in the deep south. We asked Tom what his favorite Japanese maple was in his garden, and Tom said it's probably that Tamukiyama because it's bulletproof. He's got it out in a sunnier spot in his landscape. He's like, every year that one's just, looks amazing in the fall. He's like, it's easy to look good in the spring, but my favorite ones are the winters and the fall. They've taken all the brutal summer and all the droughts and still look good. And there's something to be said about that because Tamukiyama is very consistent and very durable.
Now, Anaba Shadari, it has not as cascading of a habit as Orangiola, but Tamukiyama has not as cascading a habit as Anaba Shadari.
Yeah, it's a little more arching.
Which gives this one, if you're looking to do that floating cloud style pruning for Japanese maples, it makes Tamukiyama an excellent choice for that. And
it's easy to get little plateaus where you can see into this one for sure. We're going to do pruning a lace leaf Japanese maple video this year, so stick around for that one.
And Tamukiyama is a great one for that. The name Tamukiyama is said to mean Tamuki for the Tamuki region and Yama for mountain. But the Tamuki region actually translates as hands folded in prayer. And so together, people will take that as saying hands folded in prayer on a mountain. And such a very poetic name for a weeping Japanese maple. I think a lot of people like this tree too just because of that name, hands folded in prayer on a mountain. But I think if this tree had the name hands folded in prayer on a mountain, it might be more popular because people can say it easier than trying to say Turkey Mama. But Tamukiyama, great plant, excellent tree to bring in number 6.
One of our most popular named Japanese named red weepings to one of our most popular American named Japanese maples, Crimson Queen. Now, Crimson Queen is on everybody's list. When we were doing wholesale, all of our wholesale customers wanted to buy 20,000 Crimson Queens and 20,000 Bloodgoods. And we're like, hey, have you considered something else? No. And so Crimson Queen, though, is popular for good reason. Now, you want to give this one a little bit more late-day shade than the Tamukiyama. But Crimson Queen, one, it's a name everybody can say, but it's a cultivar that's been around, it's popular, and it's durable. It's a classic. It gives you everything most people love in a Japanese maple in a nice, dense, weeping, low habit.
I can't believe Crimson Queen was our number 5. Most nurseries would probably have Bloodgood number 1 and Crimson Queen number 2. If not, Crimson Queen number 1 and Bloodgood number 2. And for number 5, this is a plant that was introduced by one of the Vercades, the famous Vercade family. And they've introduced so many great plants that we love. Like our Japanese maple weirdo on Vercade's Jacus Potus. Love that plant. To even introducing Crimson Queen, which is one of the most popular Japanese maples in the nursery trade. And this is such a great weeping red lace leaf. I mean, it's a great weeping red lace leaf because it fits as a weeping red lace leaf under most people's windowsills. I mean, all across the country, you'll see this plant planted underneath as like almost a foundational planting right near the foundation of their house and letting it cascade underneath their windowsill because it doesn't get very tall, but it can get some nice width to it. and gives you some nice crimson red fall color. And I think that's one of the reasons why this plant has become so popular, is because that name really speaks to what this tree does. It gives you that nice crimson color in the fall, and it's such a great low, smaller weeping red lace leaf.
Yeah, this one's going to be 3 to 4 feet in height, but a little bit wider in width. Now, at our website, people always ask for mature heights. There's no such as a mature height on a Japanese maple. If you heard about the Naka Komodo weeping, we saw a 400-year-old tree. We always try to give a time frame for that. And this one's going to make a nice, compact, low-growing form. It's certainly going to be much smaller. I mean, I would say a 10-year-old tree is probably going to be 2 feet shorter than Tomukiyama. It's going to be consistently shorter, but low-growing and wide. Excellent density to it, too. It's typically one you don't see through when it's full. And it has a very distinctive leaf. If you're actually familiar with Japanese maples, it's an easy one to pick out the differences by the leaf. Those lobes are just a little bit more elongated, and it's easy to kind of notice the difference.
And again, that shape that you mentioned, it probably has an even less cascading habit, but still cascading, than Tomukiyama, which gives it that wider approach to it, a lot more lateral growth as it cascades, and gives it a unique shape. And Crimson Queen's a fantastic plant, but in a lot of climates, you want to give Crimson Queen some protection from the hot afternoon sun. But one thing I have noticed is that Crimson Queen, for a red weeping lace leaf, besides red filigree lace, it's probably one of the better weeping red lace leaves that's holding its color in the shade.
For sure, for sure. So coming in here at number 4, we've got our first extreme winter interest plant here. No surprise, this one's on our list. Always popular, always in stock too. It's one we try to keep in stock. It might have went down 1 or 2 times in 2022, but it's pretty rare we let this one drop off the website. We've got Acer Palmatum Sengokaku.
The name translates as coral towers, and this is a classic Japanese maple that gives you some of the best winter interest with that bright red bark. Now, with Sengokaku, you want to make sure you give it some sunlight to really peak that bark up, and that bark is going to get more and more intense as the winter approaches. An amazing plant to give you some amazing winter interest in the landscape.
Now, most of the ones on this list are going to work zones 5 through 9. We actually list our coral barks as 6 through 9. They have a little thinner cambiums. I've certainly seen people growing them in zone 5, but we've started to only recommend those in zone 6 through 9 because they like that high heat. They like that durability. The key with this one in colder climates is getting it to shut down well, but it's an excellent plant to be growing for winter interest. It's got some of the most intense bark. People take more pictures of this one out of leaf. You know, it's kind of snowy here in western North Carolina. I get out and take pictures of this one. It's got that bright red bark going on, and it's the spark of color and that winter garden that really gets people excited. I tend to take more pictures of it out of leaf than I even do in leaf. It's so popular for that. I think the fall color is super underrated, though.
Yeah, the fall color of that bright yellow on top of that bark as it's starting to get that red color to it is amazing. And it has one of the brightest yellow fall colors of any of the Japanese maples. So it's a great tree to pair out in the landscape with something like a Bloodgood or an Emperor One that's going to have a red leaf during the summer or in the spring. And Sengokaku is going to have a green leaf. And so it contrasts well in the spring, the summer, and then the fall with that bright yellow fall color. Outstanding. And then it gives you even more stuff during the winter when you have that bright red bark in the winter. I think the fall color, would probably be considered one of the best fall color Japanese maples, Sengokaku, because it's one of the best yellow fall colors of any of the Japanese maples.
Yeah, it's consistent. It gets some splashes of red in it too in the fall, which I love. That chartreuse green leaf is really staunch there in the spring garden. It just gives you some cool feels. And again, winter is when I get out and get this tree in my wheelhouse of thinking about it. It's awesome during every season. You're going to get everything you love about a Japanese maple, but just 4 seasons of interest with Sengokaku because you're going to get that winter garden and it's just going to show out. It's awesome in conifer gardens where we've already got, a little bit of winter texture going on, but that bark even gets to a brighter overall color in those cooler months.
I love Sengokaku in that conifer garden. Giving this tree a backdrop where you have something to really accentuate that bark really helps show it off in the winter. If you have something like a red building behind it, you're not going to get as intense showing of that color as if you have like a brown or a black building behind it that can really contrast well behind it. Giving this an evergreen backdrop, like some conifers, that really helps show off the bark and really shows off what Sengokaku can do. If you just have this tree up at the top of a hill where it's got a background of nothingness, you're not going to show off the bark as well as you do if you give this tree a nice backdrop. But I love Sengukaku for what it does in the landscape and garden. I mean, it's a great plant out there, and it's probably, people in Japanese gardening talk about having a tree that's green that gives a summery feel. And this tree definitely does that throughout the spring and the summer. It gives you a really nice summery feel, but then you get that added interest in the fall and the winter with Sengukaku.
All right, guys, so only 3 more left on this top most popular list of top sellers for 2022 here at Mr. Maple. Believe it or not, there's not a red lace leaf in the category. There's one more lace leaf and one more upright red, so if you can guess what those are. Number 3 coming in here is Acer Palmatum dissectum Waterfall. Now, Waterfall is one of your most classic weeping green Japanese maples. It's always popular for good reason. It has that nice lush foliage and goes to a very consistent bright golden yellow in the fall.
Yeah, Waterfall was actually a green weeping lace leaf that was at a state park in New Jersey near a waterfall, and it got the name Waterfall on it, likely because it was near a waterfall, but it was so aptly fit for being a green weeping lace leaf and having that cascading habit where it gets the name Waterfall.
Now, this one's often on our list for high heat tolerant plants, so that's the reason why it's very popular too. This one can go, zones 5 through 9, and it can really push it into some of those hotter zones. I know people growing this one in full sun in Columbia, South Carolina, and it looks excellent. It's a great tree for the container garden. You can put this one as a topper for a big patio planter, and it's just going to go out and look great. It pairs so nicely with any of the other lace leaves too. So if you already have a red lace leaf, Waterfall is typically someone's next purchase, kind of getting more and more into Japanese maples. And so Waterfall is typically one of those secondary purchases. They've already got a red upright or a red lace leaf, and then they're like, wait, there's different ones, and this one's yellow. And so Waterfall fits so nicely for a lot of people for an early on Japanese maple collection. So it's no shocker here that's in the top 3 here for us.
I know a lot of people will have a foundational planting with a weeping Japanese maple, and they often will have a darker colored house, and they'll think about putting a weeping red lace leaf there. And my suggestion is always put a Waterfall there, because you're going to have that same weeping habit that you want, but the green color isn't going to get lost on the darker color of your house. Or if you put something like a Crimson Queen or a Tamukiyama there on a brown or a red background, it's going to get more lost, and you're going to get more color contrast and brighten up that area by putting a tree like a weeping dissectum Waterfall Japanese maple in that location. And it's still going to give you some great fall colors like Matt talked about, with some yellows, sometimes even getting infused with some oranges late. Amazing plant that I still think is heavily underutilized is the Waterfall Japanese maple.
For sure. So coming in here at number 2, we've got Acer Palmatum Fireglow.
One of my favorite red uprights. I mean,
he's had 25 favorites on a list of 25 trees.
I love
we're up to 24 on favorites.
I love the comment that someone said the other day.
This guy's never seen a tree that isn't his favorite.
Yeah, and it's true. When it comes to Japanese maples, they're all our favorites. But Fireglow is definitely one of my favorite red uprights. I mean, it's one of the best ones because it has that glowing effect. It gets the orange red to the backside of the leaf. You give it some morning sun or afternoon sun, and you get the sunlight popping through the leaf, and it glows. I mean, it just has that glowing effect that makes this tree stand out and gives that extra dynamic out there in the landscape and garden.
Yeah, another introduction that comes from Italy. This one really stands out. I like to almost think of this one as that mid-sized upright red. It's not one of the smallest. It's not one of the tallest. It's right there in the middle. This one's typically at that like 10 to 12 foot size range, even in 10 years. So it's a little smaller than the Emperor One, a lot smaller long-term than the Bloodgood. It kind of fits in a lot of landscapes. A lot of people are looking for that mid-sized, upright Japanese maple. And this one fits the bill perfect. I mean, it's not going to be a massive tree in the landscape, but it's going to bring that color you want, first off, in a Japanese maple. A lot of people are thinking that bright red. It's going to bring that immediately and then not outgrow their landscape. So it makes sense why Fireglow is so popular on our list. Excellent fall color. I mean, the fall colors are Fireglow. I mean, that's where it gets the name. They have oranges to almost bright reds in it. It's consistently intense red. I think there's a little touch of orange in there, which makes it even look more picked up sometimes.
Yeah, Fireglow just gives you amazing colors for an upright red, it's also fairly heat tolerant.
Yeah.
I mean, for being a heat tolerant upright red, that gives you just, if you're looking for a mid-sized upright red Japanese maple, look no further. Fire Glow is fantastic. It's becoming more and more popular because of the name, but it's also just amazing in what it does out there in the garden.
Okay, guys, we're up to number 1. Can you guess what it is?
Take a second. Can anybody guess what the number 1 Japanese maple for 2022 for MrMaple is?
I mean, we never talk about it at all.
This is most shots fired, but this is probably also highest percentage as well.
Right. It was probably one we had the most numbers in, but also sold out the most. So Acer, Palmatum, Makawa, Yatsubusa. You've heard us talk about it here on our website or on our podcast, our YouTube channel, and you've definitely seen it on our website because we tend to not let it fall off. But Acer, Palmatum, Makawa, Yatsubusa was our most popular tree in 2022, and for good reason.
It is number 1 by far, too. I mean, a lot of these others are kind of close, but this one is number 1 by far. It has that tightly layering habit, that shingle-like habit that gives this tree an animal-like appearance on a small dwarf Japanese maple. It's bulletproof, too.
Yeah, it's got that consistency to it. It kind of has everything people love about a Japanese maple. It's dwarf. It looks bonsai-ish already for a lot of people there in the landscape. It's got unique density. That shingled layering effect to it really adds to the ornamental appeal for this plant. And it goes out in the landscape, the container garden. It fits small spaces. And it's brutally durable, too. I mean, this one can handle a good bit of heat. Makawa Yatsubusa is going to work zones 5 through 9. And it does excellent even in high heat areas in a lot of sun. Like I've seen this one in zone 8 in heavy sun, just performing and doing excellent. And it kind of looks like a Muppet. I think that's one of the reasons. It looks like something that might talk to you in the landscape. It puts on these little crazy new growth arms. It looks even very ornamental out of leaf. I love how it has that almost bone-like texture to it in the winter. It kind of looks skeletal. It has a very, architectural interest to it even out of leaf.
Super popular for bonsai. Anyone who has this plant, they love it. It's one of their favorites. It was the very first maple of the year. And I even remember when Matt and I were doing garden shows at the Swan Lake Iris Festival. And Matt and I were going around, people said, you got to go check out our Dr. Seuss tree. And we thought they were talking about Acer Palmatum Dr. Seuss. No, they were talking about a Makawa Yatsubusa that looks like something that you would expect from Dr. Seuss.
Right. It has that cartoonish animal-like. You described it as animal-like, but it is almost like cartoonish. It feels like a Muppet. It feels like a Dr. Seuss. It feels like something you might interact with. I mean, you could put some sunglasses on this one in the landscape and people might walk up and talk to it. It definitely has that it factor for Japanese maples. Whatever it is about it that people like, they like it a lot. It's always consistently in the top sales for us here on MrMaple. So we hope you've liked it. And actually for good reason. I have to point out before we move on from that, the fall color is awesome. It's fiery, orangey reds in the fall from a lush green. But it's always at one of our top sales plants.
And I also have to bring up, do you remember that Swan Lake Iris Gardens? Remember getting attacked by the swan?
Oh, man. Yeah, don't go anywhere near swans. Those things are brutal. I got away from him. He didn't quite get me in the bite, but he was pretty close. So I had a swan flying at me, snapping at me that was probably taller than I am. I think it was probably like 6'5". At least it felt that way when it was chasing me down. That was a massive swan. But yeah, anyway, Makawa Yatsubusa, always popular for good reason. We hope you've enjoyed this list of 2022's top most popular Japanese maples. You guys requested this one, so always let us know in the comment sections on our YouTube channel what kind of videos you'd like to see or upcoming podcasts. We definitely love to see that kind of suggestions, and oftentimes we'll take it. So this was one of our suggested comments we dove into. We wanted to break down our most popular plants for 2022 for you guys. And just to kind of give you a well-rounded look at Japanese maples, I thought it was a very diverse mix when we printed it off. It made a lot of sense to bring this to you as a collection and kind of break it down that way. If you're getting into Japanese maples, I mean, definitely take a look at each of these on this list. They're very, very popular. They're durable. They're plants that we do a lot of for good reason. Oftentimes people ask me for a Japanese maple that I consider to be a wimp. And we tend to weed out the wimps. Like if we find a Japanese maple that we don't like, we don't tend to produce it. So you're never going to see Japanese maples in our top 25 most popular trees that we don't believe in. If it's something we think it stinks, we tend to push it to the side and not produce it, to be honest with you. If there's trees that we don't find consistently perform and grow and do well for customers, they're not likely to make our lineup very consistently at all. And if they do, they probably come with a warning that we think this is a good plant, but it might not be as durable as some of these we listed. And so these top 25 here are popular for good reason. These are the ones picked by the customers, you yourselves. People put their money where their mouth is and pick these out. These were the ones that were the most consistently bought. And I would say for good reason. All these are very popular Japanese maples and highly sought after.
And people always ask for our top expert picks, and all of these would be in our expert picks. I mean, these are all fantastic Japanese maples. But like Matt said, these are the picks by y'all. I mean, these are the top picks throughout the year of 2022 by all these amazing customers that we have. So it gives you an idea of some great plants that can do well in your landscape. And if you don't have these 25, these are a great 25 to start off with.
Yeah, the great plants. If you heard anything on our list here that isn't currently in stock, you can always sign up to get notified via email on MrMaple.com. Sign up for our weekly emails. We're always adding at least 10 new plants. We say that often, but typically it's more like the 20 at 10. We're putting 20 new plants out every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern on MrMaple.com. So there's always something new and exciting coming back. Guys, we love that live chat. You guys are awesome. It makes it so much fun. Even if you're talking about stuff that we're not talking about here in the podcast, sometimes we're the secondary thought there for that live chat. You guys are crazy. We love it, though. And definitely get involved in that live chat. These videos air every single day on YouTube at 9 a.m. And then our podcast airs every single Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern. So hop in there. There's, 50 to 100 people in there chatting it up every single video. And it makes it a lot of fun. You guys get us enthusiastic about this. You rejuvenate our kindred spirit for maples if we need that even. But you kind of push us to be even more passionate and crazy about this. So we love providing you with a Japanese maple talk show every single week. If that's something you enjoy, definitely like, subscribe, and share. Go find us on an audio platform and give us 5 stars. That goes a long way toward getting our content out there.
Thank y'all so much for listening. Thank y'all so much for watching and getting involved. As always, we couldn't do this top 25 if we didn't have great customers like y'all.
Yeah, great sales too. We really appreciate 2022 being one of our best years ever. And we're excited about some new things we're doing in 2023 for y'all. We're bringing even more content. We're not stopping. And we greatly appreciate you being a part of that. So take care.
God bless.
And have a great day.